Well, hello there, everybody. We are live. This is Kevin Thomason with Draft to Digital, and you're listening to Self-Publishing Insiders, where we talk to all the folks who are on the inside of self-publishing and can share their wisdom with you. And today, I am really thrilled to have someone that I consider a good friend. Bill, I don't know if you feel the same way. I'm not
I
going to put you on
do.
the spot or anything in front of hundreds of people, but yes, Bill Bernhardt, William Bernhardt to you, if you're not in the know. Author, organizer of the what's the official name of your conference? Because I keep
It's
referring to it as Red Sneaker.
WriterCon. See, I'm
WriterCon.
wearing WriterCon merch as we speak.
There you go. And you can get your own WriterCon merch if you start attending WriterCon.
Every year, Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend, and that's a pretty good conference. We enjoyed being there this last time. I was there with Lexi Green, who is actually in the comments right now helping folks out, and Dan Wood showed up.
Hey Dan, hey Lexi.
He's local, so and Lexi is technically local too. So
You guys have been there every year for the last at least 5 years.
Yeah,
you're like our primary sponsor. Always
the only thing that derailed us at all was some big world event that happened for a year. So,
but I remember you phoned in your talk or videoed in. So
I always
you were
phone
still
in
there.
my talks, Bill. I'm always phoning in my talks. So welcome to the show.
Good
William,
to be here.
Bill. What do you want me to call you during this?
Bill. William, that's for book covers.
That's formal. So you're one of those people, man. Okay. There's a group of you who are practicing or former attorneys who decide to write thriller novels. That's right. You fit that category. What is it about being an attorney that makes you want to become a thriller writer?
Thriller. I don't know, except that I do think that, and these are big generalizations, but lawyers tend to be readers. They tend to be verbal. I mean, that's what lawyering and law school is. You read, you write, you make arguments. It's pretty much the same as being, some would say you create fictional worlds. It's pretty much the same as being a writer. So I think that lawyers may be more inclined in that direction than some, although I know some great doctor writers and at least one architect writer, and it's certainly not restricted to lawyers.
Yeah, that's true. James Rollins is a former veterinarian, so
that's right.
Get in this game, really.
Child used to work in television, for Pete's sake. You never know.
That's what his story is. Yeah, one of my favorites, because he got into he started writing novels as a form of vengeance, and I think that's just the best reason to become an author.
I've heard that story, and here's the saddest thing I'll admit. I was at Thriller Fest. This was many years ago. It was the first time I'd ever been there, and I thought, well, I'll just see who's here. I'll wander down, and there was like one guy in the bar. So I said, "Hi, you here for Thriller Fest?" Yes, he's got an accent, And I talked with the guy for like an hour before I realized I was chatting with Lee Child.
He probably loved it that way. I think he would. In many ways, I think he likes to remain anonymous. Maybe. I don't know. You can never tell with these guys. He's doing much more sort of behind the scenes now, but we're not here to talk about Lee Child per se.
He doesn't need the help. No,
he doesn't need the help. He's got all the promotion he needs. So what was it? I mean, we talked about the idea of the lawyer turned thriller novelist, but what was it in particular that drew you to writing? Like, what made you decide you were going to be an author?
Well, the truth is I always wanted to be a writer. That's all I ever cared about. My mother says I was telling people I was going to be a writer when I was 7, which I know seems pretty out there, but hey, it's my mother, so you got to believe it, right? And the hours, if I had any advantage, it certainly wasn't where I lived or who I knew, because I didn't know anybody in the book world, but I did know what I wanted, and I was pretty laser focused on it. And I was an English major, of course, but shockingly had not written my first bestseller by the time the end of college was approaching.
Right.
And so I thought,
What a surprise.
yeah, I better figure out some way to pay the bills. So I went to law school, and that worked out fine. I practiced for about 10 years before the books were going well enough that I thought I could put that aside. But even when I'm not practicing law, I still end up writing about legal things more often than not. So it's not as if that education was wasted. It turned out to be a great boon.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can put it. I still put the English degree to work, I think.
Right.
I think technically. Um
Well, you can write, and sadly, as any English teacher will tell you, a lot of people can't these days.
What did you find was the biggest transition though from switching from writing for English classes to writing for an audience?
Well, the difference is that, if you're writing for an audience, that it needs to be accessible and
Yeah.
never boring. I mean, not even for a sentence or two, or you risk losing your audience. It just needs to go down like a drink of water. That's
Yeah.
one of the things we talk about in some of the writing programs I've done, or the books on writing I've done, the Red Sneaker books, one of them,
Yeah.
Sizzling Style. And that's what it's pretty much all about. Write and revise and revise and revise, not because you're trying to show everybody how literary or poetic you are, but because you want the meaning of that sentence to be immediately clear the first time the reader reads it, no speed bumps, and they just keep sailing through.
Yeah.
And later on, they say, wow, that was a good read. Or, I couldn't put it down. Things sometimes critics will make fun of, but when I hear somebody say, I couldn't put that book down, I think there's an on his
Yeah.
language, his or her language, making sure it was just exactly the way it should be.
Yeah. Exactly. What's your tip for the best opening line?
Spend a lot of time at it, because that's going to be the most important line you write.
Yeah.
And that first page and that first chapter, they're going to be the most important things in the book. And if you don't hook people right up front, you may not ever. I know
Yeah.
sometimes at my small group retreats, I'll hear somebody say, yeah, I know I've got a lot of world building or what, but it really picks up in chapter 3.
Right.
You can guess my response. Start with chapter 3. Forget about the rest. You can do that later. You got
Start
to
with
hook
chapter
them
3.
right up front.
I like that. Sounds like a chapter head. Is that a chapter head in one of your books?
Probably not,
Start
but
with
it
chapter
could
3.
be.
That sounds like good
Is
advice.
It's not unique to anyone. I published,
Right.
do I say the name? No, I won't say the name, but way back in the 90s, I published
Yeah.
someone who has published the first book from someone who is very successful now. And I liked the book when it came in. I thought it had a lot of potential. The problem was, and I'm not exaggerating, 50 pages of time waste before the story started. Once the
Yeah.
story started, fine, but it was like 50 pages of the protagonist driving down the road making kind of smart alecky remarks about things that weren't all that funny. And I said, we're slashing this. And we made other changes too, but it paid off. And the book
Yeah.
sold well, and now she's doing really well.
That's the tough part, I think. And it is for me. I mean, the deciding what to cut is always tough.
Right.
I want to keep it all. And in fact, I'll usually take anything I cut and try to figure out a way to work it in somewhere else in the book, as long as
Really?
yeah, if I can.
Yeah.
That's not always possible.
No,
What's
not me. I'm a big cutter. I'm not exaggerating when I say between first draft and last draft, I typically take out 20,000 words. But
Wow.
the first draft is long, I'm just
Yeah.
writing. And that's fine, because if your first draft is long, then you can hack and slash, and it doesn't matter. It's still long enough. I'm not sure long enough really even exists, that qualification in the ebook world, because people don't really notice how long your book is. But
True.
I cut and cut and cut and revise. And sometimes you said it's hard to know when. To me, the standard, I look at it and say, could this be cut? Not
Yeah.
does it have to be, but
Yeah.
could it be cut? Do we really lose anything? And if the answer is no, then that gets cut. Sometimes I'll read a chapter that I've written and think that's fine, but maybe a little longer than it really needs to be. Could I cut a page out of this somehow? And usually can.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can always take stuff out. I
Hmm.
think I'm more of an add stuff in guy, honestly, because what I'll do. Well, let me start with this. What's your target word length for a book?
Well, this just shows how old I am, but it's 80,000 words in my mind, although
Yeah,
I am perfectly well aware that some are going longer, some are going short. I don't know how many are really going longer anymore.
yeah,
I saw, here I will say the name, good friend of mine, Steve Berry, fantastic writer. But last time we had dinner, even he told me that he's still with traditional publishing and they've told him shorter, you know
yeah.
the
Yep.
80,000 words is fine. They don't need. Back in the 90s, I think a lot of publishers were encouraging people to write those long,
Right.
kind of, Tom Clancy-ish thrillers because guys would think, well, now I'm getting my money's worth for this $30 hardcover because it's so
Right.
thick. But nobody thinks that anymore, and paper is expensive, and everyone's being encouraged to write shorter.
It's always interesting. I get so many different schools of thought on that word count because there are
Yeah,
some there are rumors in the author world, especially in the thriller author world, that certain river themed retailers prefer for thrillers to be in the 80,000 plus range,
really.
and that they won't promote them otherwise. But my experience with my books that tend to be in the 65 to 70 range is isn't necessarily true. So,
Yeah, I haven't heard that before, and I'm not unless you're being published by that river themed retailer,
right.
or you're taking out ads with them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much
And
promotion you can expect.
maybe that's where that comes from. Maybe they want their ads aimed at,
Longer
longer
books.
books. Who
Mm,
knows? Who knows? You can't predict anything about that river. It goes where it
no,
wants to go.
that's right.
So, uh, okay, so around 80,000 words, that's your typical target. And you're saying you
Yes.
cut 20,000, do you add more in, or how's
Rarely.
that work? Okay.
Every now and again, I'll think, you know what this needs? I never did this and that. We need to add something here, but
Yeah.
mostly it's just cutting, cutting, cutting.
Yeah. I get the impression from you, Bill, that you are an outliner. Am I
Oh,
on
yeah,
point? Okay.
absolutely, totally. I mean, I've done it all ways, but I know what
Yeah.
works better. Could I
Yeah.
write with an outline? Yes, I just think it'd take longer to get
Yeah.
to a good draft.
Yeah.
And, I tend to get up in the morning and want to sit down and do it, but there are other things
Yeah.
I want to do too. So I don't want to spend an hour staring out the window thinking what
Right.
happens next.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
novels are so big, there's so many characters and there's so much going on. It's really easy to get lost, to
Yeah.
get halfway through and think, what is this about? Where are we going? I
Yeah.
can't even. It's really nice to have an outline to look at and say, oh, yeah, yeah, right, right. Okay, back on track.
What do you consider a best practice for outlining then? What's your method?
Well, my wife, Laura, who also
Yes.
writes, gives me, she can, he can knock out an outline in a day. Who can do that? I think, well, yeah, I can write it in a day, but that's only if I've been thinking about it for weeks, if you know what
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
I've had the idea, I've been making notes. I'll watch something on television and think, ooh, ooh, that sparks another idea. I could do something like, and start writing notes. And eventually, when I think I've got enough to outline it, then I outline it. And yeah, I can probably do it in a day, but that's only because I've already got the material. I'm really just kind of putting it in order and making sense of it.
Yeah. So you
And for that
mentioned
matter, the outline is never written in stone. Every
right.
day I write, and the next thing I do after I, save and close out the word processing program is open up my outline because probably changes have to be made because you always add stuff when you're
Right.
actually writing the scene, it changes. And so I type all that in and show how that's going to impact the next. So it's not at all a cage, it's an organic, growing thing all along, but it does help me stay on track.
Do you have a process you follow for the outline? Do you use like an app, or is it what's your method? Is it
No, I'm
just a
not
bullet
that
list?
fancy. I've got Scrivener and I know
Okay.
but what I just open a word processing document and say one, Ben
Yes.
goes into the courtroom or whatever, two.
Yeah.
It's not fancy at all.
What's funny to me is I've talked to thousands of authors at this point, most of whom probably outline in some form or another, and it almost always ends up back at that bullet list. Like
Right.
it's, everyone starts off with, well, I'm going to use this structure from, Save the Cat or something, and then I'm going to use this app, and I'm going to use this toy, and it always ends up with, well, I was in a hurry, so I opened Word, and so
Right.
that's good.
But,
So how do you keep it clean though? Like the reason I don't outline,
mhm.
two reasons. One, I will effectively just write the book in the outline because I don't know how to be brief about the
Mm.
idea. I want to describe it, my instinct is to describe it in detail. And also, if I do outline when I'm done, I feel like the story's finished. And so I'm not driven to write the book.
Oh, I don't feel that way, but you may be writing more detailed outlines than I am. I'm
Yeah,
not
I need
really
to.
exaggerating when I say chapter 1, Ben walks into the courtroom, or
Okay.
chapter 2, Daniel calls the coroner to the witness stand, or whatever.
Yeah,
These
that's
are
my
not
mistake.
detailed outlines at all. They just keep the story moving forward.
Now you've mentioned this a couple times now, but you've got courses and you've got books aimed at helping authors get into this business. So,
Right.
is there do you share like formulas and things for this sort of thing? Is that how that works for you?
I don't really have a formula, but I do talk a lot about structure. In fact, the first
Yeah,
of those Red Sneaker books on writing was called Story Structure, which I really only wrote because at that time I was teaching a what do they call it? Like a community service course for OSU. And I thought, it'd be a lot cooler if I had a textbook because
yeah,
all the good professors have textbooks, right? And so I wrote this down and they loved it. And I thought, well, heck, I'll do some more. And then I recorded the audio only because Laura had a setup in her closet because she was recording audiobooks. I thought this is easy. And that's when it really took off. And an audiobook. Anyway, your question was, so the first one was story structure, because I think this is an important topic that people don't talk about.
yeah,
Nobody, it's like they almost don't want to admit, at least in some circles, that they outline and they're structuring their book. It's more romantic to say the muse sits on my shoulder and whispers genius, but that's not really
yeah.
the way it happens.
My
So
muse likes to beat the hell out of me every morning around 6 a.m. So
I think my muse keeps saying, "This is boring. There are so many fun things you could be doing." Maybe that's not the muse, that's some other voice.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I think story structure, having the essential elements, putting them in the right order is
Mhm.
critical. And so few people wanted to talk about it at conferences and whatnot. So I made that the first book, and still where I think people should start. I think people don't, and I don't think this is just genre fiction. I don't care what you're writing. An understanding of how stories work
Yeah.
is just going to make you a better writer.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. What's your I don't know, what do you have like some fundamentals of story structure? Like is there anything you can share that
Well, a
we
point I
want
like to
everyone to go
make,
buy the book.
yeah,
Everyone go
yeah,
buy
by
the
my
book.
books, because
Yeah,
that's the one I should have put over my head. I
yeah,
wasn't
yes,
thinking.
exactly. Well, you got plot. That's the one. That's
Oh,
one of them,
good
right?
point. But that's a novel. That's plot counterplot. That's
Oh,
people plotting against each other.
oh,
It's
see,
not.
I was totally off base. I thought that was going to be one of your red sneaker books, which we need to talk about red sneaker. I want to ask you
Yeah, this is
where
the
that
one I
came
should
from.
have put
There you
up.
go.
There's Perfecting Plot.
That's the one
The
I've got.
I
Yeah.
think that was the third one. Um, oh, what was the question? Now I've totally lost it.
Oh, I've totally lost it too. Did you have any like a compact
Oh,
sort of list of
uh,
tips or something for plot?
y- well, focus on the character. Your
Yeah.
character is the most important thing. I have heard too many times people saying, "Well, uh, you know, genre fiction is plot driven, but literary fiction is character driven." And you can see where the bias there is.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
plus, it's just wrong. All
Right.
fiction is character driven. Do you have to have a plot? Yes, I hope so. I hope you have one in those literary novels too. But it rises or falls on the characters. If people don't care about your character, if they don't like them, which doesn't mean they're perfect, but there has to be something that interests the reader at some level. I don't care how exciting your plot is. If they don't have any interest in the character, that book's going to flop.
That's
And that's
true.
probably more important than ever today, when so many people are writing series characters, which is one of the best ways to break into the business right now. But then even more emphasis on the character, because you're sure not going to build a series on a character that nobody wants to read about.
Right.
There's got to be something interesting and appealing and so forth.
What makes for a good character?
Well, I would say a lot of things, but fundamentally, the character has to want something. That's what drives the plot forward, and they have to have something that makes them either sympathetic or empathetic to the reader. Meaning, basically, you either like them, or maybe you don't exactly like what they're doing. You know, you've read the book where the character is in a dark place at the beginning of the book,
Right.
which can get old if it doesn't get better. But I think this is something I did in my book Dark Eye. If the reader can see that, yeah, the person's in a bad place and she knows it, and she's trying, well, you know, but it's just not easy because life isn't easy. Well, that's something readers can relate to. I think at that point your character just became empathetic, and they can relate to them and, you know, cheer for them and hope they do better and pull themselves out of whatever dark hole they're in.
Right. Is empathy more important than sympathy when it comes to a character?
Yeah, not necessarily. I don't know. There, you know, when you think about most successful series characters out there, you're not really talking about, you know, depressive, melancholy goth characters who aren't fun to be around. You mostly have people who are living the dream in some way or another. You know, we just talked about Lee Child. What's the appeal of Jack Reacher? You know, talk about I've got no strings on me. He's got nothing. He's got an ATM card and he wanders the country and always finds some mess to straighten out, and always finds some girl who's crazy about him. Some woman, undoubtedly, since he's an adult. I should correct that. And you know, for many people, male and female, that's kind of the dream. You know, nothing tying me down. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. Similarly, in the series, the Daniel Pike series, the first book is The Last Chance Lawyer. And the idea there is that, I'll cut to the chase, but after a disastrous situation with a law firm, Dan is recruited into this group, the Last Chance Lawyers, run by a mysterious figure who only talks to them, you know, by remote voice, like Charlie's Angels or something.
I was about to say.
And, for the new era, and takes care of all the money. They're paid well. And all of them are worthy people who, for one reason or another, can't find a lawyer anywhere else. So they're the last chance. And so, you know, what do lawyers always complain about? Their clients, because whether they like the case or not, they're economically more or less compelled to take whatever walks in the door. Well, not these guys. They can pick and choose and only do cases that have merit and feel like they're on the side of the angels. That is the lawyer's dream. So that's another, you know, really kind of fantasy, but something people can really like and want to read about. Because I don't know about you, but I was astonished, even in the 90s when legal thrillers were the biggest thing out there. And well, I can see why people who don't do this every day would be interested, but surely lawyers are going to go home after a long day in court and read this stuff, but they do. Lawyers are huge readers of this book.
They need inspiration.
I guess so. So here's, you know, the Last Chance Lawyers showing them what they kind of wish they were doing, but probably aren't.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I read comic books and superhero stories, because after a long day of saving the world myself, I need inspiration. Are legal thrillers like the whole of your work, or do you write anything else?
No, not at all. But that's certainly what's you know, built the house that I'm sitting in right now. Legal thrillers have been very good to me. I actually didn't do them for a long time. I had done 19 books in the Ben Kincaid series. What's wrong with this picture? You can't stop at 19, right? I got to address that at some point. And then I hit one of those round number birthdays and thought, really? I mean, this is a pretty good gig, but this is all I'm going to do for the rest of my... So I took some time off had some money in the bank, and did other things. I wrote a couple of historical novels, one of which got this close to getting made into a miniseries, but who knows, maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
And I did a young adult book and a children's book. Did two now, as of a couple days ago, 3 books of poetry. And it was really only 10 years later that I came back to the legal world with Daniel Pike. But at that point, having been away for a while, it seemed fun again, you know? Yeah. And the world had changed enough that I thought, I've got new things to write about here. And so I went back to it, and boy, was that a good decision. That turned out really well.
So it sounds like you didn't have any real issues. I mean, were there challenges to switching genres, basically? I mean, did you have any problems there?
Not for me, but realistically, and this is not a criticism of anybody, but readers, expect their author to do more or less the same thing next time, not meaning the exact same book, but the same area, the same genre. People who love my legal thrillers are just not likely to pick up a book of my poetry. Right. And I totally get that. And that's fine. It doesn't hurt my feelings in the slightest. Just be patient. There'll be another thriller pretty soon.
Yeah. Do you think readers follow the author, or do they follow the characters more?
Both. I think most readers that you talk to are going to say, I follow the author, I love the author, but often that's only as long as authors are doing what they like, what they want them to do. And it's not just me. Think about when Anne Rice shifted from vampires to writing religious stories, the adolescence of Jesus and whatnot. Her fans did not follow her into this new thing.
Yeah. I remember, I know he's a controversial guy, but my favorite author was always Orson Scott Card, and I came in on Ender's Game like everyone else, but he wrote several other books outside the sci-fi genre, including some religious ones, and I devoured all of those. I didn't like them quite as much, but
good for you.
I always said
I didn't
the guy
even know
wrote
that.
a cookbook, I'd read it. Yeah. He's got a Women of the Bible series that I actually think was pretty good. But it's all relative. But anyway, so good. You didn't have any real trouble with shifting genres. I mean, was there at least not, except for your poetry, I guess, but with the historical stuff, first of all, the question I really wanted to ask earlier on that was, what do you do for research? How do you handle research?
Again, that depends on the book, but the one I was alluding to a second ago was called Nemesis, and it was a slightly fictionalized account of the Cleveland Torso murder in the 30s. I was reading a biography of Eliot Ness, who, of course, we all know from the Untouchables, but who realized, at least until I read this book, that maybe 10 years or so after all of that, he was in Cleveland as the safety director. Prohibition had been repealed. He had to find new work. And he was a safety director when this guy, who's generally credited with being America's first true serial killer, starts killing people, and the city's expecting him to do something about it. And he didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do at that time. All the forensic profiling and whatnot we rely on now to try and track serial killers didn't exist then. And so here's this well-known crime fighter in this great case, and it seemed like nobody's telling that. They're telling that Al Capone story over and over again. I mean, the truth is Ness didn't have that much to do with taking down Eliot Ness. That was, they got him on tax fraud. And I thought this was a much better story. Why isn't anybody telling that? So I wrote this, and I think the answer is because it was never solved, at least not officially. Right. So I spent about 2 years, not every day, but periodically researching that, going to Cleveland, looking at the records, and everything I looked at just made it more interesting than I thought it was before. Anyway, so the book follows really very factually the case. Of course, I invent dialogue and whatnot, but what happens is pretty much what happens until we get to the last, I don't know, 30 pages or so, where I present my solution, my version of what I think happened.
Yeah.
Which some of the nonfiction writers, one in particular I'm thinking of, who have researched this, have said publicly they think I got it right. So that they think that. So that's pretty cool.
Nice. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Now you just need them to write a blurb to that effect. So that's good. And that's the kind of thing that in itself would make a great thriller novel plot, is the thriller novelist who fictionalizes a true story and gets it right.
Right. Well, see, that's kind of what plot counterplot is.
Is that what that is?
The protagonist is a thriller writer, and there are, without giving it away, I'll just say bad guys who want to steal a heavily protected government weapon and think there's no way, who could figure out a way to get in to this, well-protected enclave. Well, there's this guy who writes book after book where his hero breaks into places, and maybe he's the guy.
Yeah.
And so they grab him and try and force him to plot for them. And of course, he pretends to be going along, but he's also counter plotting against them and back and forth. And that's what that one's all about.
That, by the way, is why there's that government program, the Red Cell program, that has like Brad Thor and Michael Bay and people in it. So, which I always thought would make a great, probably television series, really. I mean, that would make a great story all its own. So
it could be a good premise.
I've kicked that around, so I got dibs on that. You can't take that one.
You got it. It's yours. Everybody listening knows it's yours. So
that's it. I've licked it. It's mine. What's your timeline on a book from start to finish?
Oh, it depends. I think the quickest I've ever done it is 4 months, but that's pretty extraordinary. 6 is probably more real. And some of that, you get to a point where you just, if I want to take off a day and spend some time with the kids, I always write a little bit every day in the morning, but maybe not as much. I'm more merciful with myself than I used to be now that the kids are grown and they're out of college and are almost out of college and whatnot. So 6 months is probably more realistic.
Yeah.
I felt like, sometimes I don't even think of it as a job, because it is, after all, what I always wanted to do, writing, and I get to do it. And it pays the bills. And sometimes I feel guilty, like, basically I retired when I was 35 and I've been taking it. Did you read not too long ago, Stuart Woods passed away? And I
did not know that.
Yeah. And in his obituaries, everybody was quoting this thing where he says he basically writes for an hour a day because he has other things he likes to do in the morning and in the afternoon. He's got hobbies, but from 11 to 12, he would write a chapter. And that's how he got his books done. And they sold very well. So
this is what
who's to say?
Yeah, I've been telling authors this forever. It doesn't really, everyone sort of daydreams about, being able to write all day. And I got to tell you from experience that writing all day is kind of exhausting and isn't much fun. And, I did that for a very long time. I had this is what I do career, just sit and write all day long. I don't know. I kind of prefer having a little something to do and interacting with people and, I like Stephen King's perspective, that writing happens around life, not the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good.
I cut you off though, Bill. Sorry.
Oh, I don't remember what it was. Sorry.
Oh, bad host. I'm a bad host. Yeah.
I mean, if you write every day, you're going to get there in time. I mean, if you're seriously writing pages every day, then you're going to get there. And if there's no deadline, maybe you don't. Here's the hard thing, because as soon as you indicate, no, you don't have to work 12 hours a day on your book, then it's like the gateway drug, and pretty soon people aren't writing at all. And that's why I try and get people in my programs to commit to writing every day, or some kind of schedule, whatever they can do, figure it out and commit to it. Because otherwise you sit down and think, oh yeah, I need to feed the cat and water the
Yeah.
plants, and oh my gosh, I'm doing that thing with Kevin today at noon, so maybe I'll just skip to, and the laundry, laundry seems really appealing when you should be writing. And
Yeah.
pretty
All of
soon
a
you didn't
sudden,
write.
yeah. If you want to get anything done around my house, tell me to go write. Let's pop in. I got some questions that have kind of popped up, and if you're
Okay.
listening right now live, feel free to drop in more questions. I'll take a look and flag them. But this first one's from William Brinkman. Because we're talking about best practices, Bill, I think this
Mm-hmm.
you can field this. Is having a perma-free first in series still effective?
Perma-free. I've never done that, so I'm not the one who should testify. I'm, you know, kind of, annoyed and offended by the idea of making anything of mine free. I spent months writing it. Now,
Yeah.
I'm okay with super discounted, 99 cents free for the first in a series,
Yeah.
particularly if it's a long series, because you're trying to lure people in, right? They like the first one, they'll perhaps get the other. And
Right.
let's face it, ebooks do lend to impulse shopping. It's so
Right.
easy to say, "Oh, I like that book. I'm going to get the boom, 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 boom," and I've bought all the others in this
Right.
series. So maybe that would work. Of course, if you're going to do that at Amazon, that means you've got to be in their special program, which I don't
Right.
remember the name of, and I don't want to do that either. I'm not dissing Amazon, but I'd like to. I mean, that's why I'm at Draft to Digital, right? I want my books to go everywhere. So
Right. Right. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I don't like pricing things free because for one, you're trying to cultivate an audience that's willing to buy, and free appeals to basically everyone, but it doesn't necessarily nurture the right market. Like you're basically just saying, here's my free book, and people who love free books will grab it. I
well,
think you
plus,
should charge a little something.
yeah, it looks to me like there have been times when I've seen some of my books be free, not my doing, but there's a book bub or whatever going on.
Yeah.
And sure, you know, people, they'll download 7,000 copies in a day. But
Yeah.
how many of those are actually read? I mean, some of those are just people say, "Oh, it's free." Boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom. And
Yeah.
who cares? It's free, right?
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
necessarily going to inspire anybody to read it.
Right. Yeah. I'm right there with you. Jenny. Hello, Jenny. And she said hi to both of us earlier, by the
Hey,
way.
Jenny.
What made you want to create the Red Sneaker Writers book series and help others?
Well, I think I just told how the Red Sneaker Writer book series started. I did one and then I did three and they were doing well. So I kept doing it until I ran out of topics. 10 was probably enough of those. But I've always been, I've been doing a conference. We didn't always call it WriterCon, but I've been doing that for something like 15 years. And I've been doing small group retreats, we call them now. I used to call them seminars, but that sounds so teachy. Retreat sounds a lot more appealing, doesn't
Yeah.
it? And when we go someplace nice like Eureka Springs, and it does seem like a retreat. Anyway, to me, I just think back to when I was that 7-year-old in a small town in Oklahoma who wanted to be a writer more than anything else. And of course, I wasn't even aware of things enough to think about money. I just thought, wouldn't that be cool if I walked into the library and my name was on the spine of one of those books?
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. But trying to find anybody who knew anything about writing who would respond to "I want to be a writer" with anything other than get realistic.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to, go to school or something. It would have made such a difference if there had been a WriterCon or a small group thing or anything I could have attended back then. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. Maybe make it a little easier for the next generation of
I want to
writers.
point out to Jenny that this time I did not refer to you as Jeremy. So that's an in joke with me and her.
Hey, Jenny's a terrific writer. I've read some of her work and it is first rate.
And it was a pleasure meeting her at the WriterCon this last time as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. Friendly one says, love your Red Sneaker books, but always wonder, is there more to the story of their theme than you have shared to date? I'm guessing that's
The-
a question about
oh,
red
why is
sneakers.
it red sneakers?
Yeah.
Probably there isn't more to it that I've shared today, except that it occurred to me and I went with it. You know, people always talk about branding. I probably
Yeah.
should have hired someone, but to me, I just wanted something that's not lacking in pizzazz, but straightforward.
Yeah.
Or to put, a more direct thumb on it, I was tired of going to conferences, sometimes at universities, sometimes not, where you hear people who haven't really written a whole lot given a talk that seems to me does more to obfuscate the subject matter than explain it.
Yeah.
And I thought that's not helping anybody. It's hard enough as it is. So when I wrote these books, I just wanted it to be direct. I'm not going to waste your point, waste your time rather. I'm just, here's what you need to know. Sometimes books on writing become an excuse for not writing.
Right.
People buy them all and think I got to read these. Not mine, man. You'll finish those in a couple hours. Get back to it, right? Apply what you learned and write some more. And for some reason, I connected that with red sneakers, my Converses that I love. But, they're not fancy, but they are kind of flashy and they do what they're supposed to do. And they're not putting on airs. They're just cool. And that's the kind of writer that, I'm trying to encourage people to do. Tell a good
I think
story.
I think in terms of branding, I think that's right on, man. I think you got it. Rusty has a couple of questions, actually. We'll start with this one. Do you believe books such as ebooks are only 1,500 to 2,000 words? Oh, that are only 1,500 to 2,000 words have potential? Short fiction.
Yeah, that would be a short even for a short story.
Yeah.
I don't know. Short stories sell for 99 cents. I've got a few out there, and particularly the Christmas themed ones do well every Christmas. But even those are longer than 1,500, 2,000. That'd be like 10 manuscript pages for me. That's not quite, but almost flash fiction. So I don't know. I haven't specifically done that. Are people buying anything that short?
I have some stuff that's I have a couple of things. Like I'll write short stories every now and then, and I'll go ahead and publish them as books. And they don't grab an audience. And a lot of when I announce them, my readers say, "Oh, I don't read short stories. I want a full novel." But I figure it doesn't hurt to have them out there. So I wouldn't say they're a huge seller.
Yeah. Now, if you've got a series character, if you're going to do a Daniel Pike story in 2,000 words, then you can probably sell that to the people who like the novels. And this will be a nice in-between aperitif or something. But on its own,
I would say use them less for trying to get someone to buy them and make a revenue off of them, and more for enticing people into your world.
That makes sense.
Like post them on your blog or something. But I'm also a big fan of sell what you can sell. So
well, that might be what the previous questioner was pointing toward. I could give away a 2,000 word short story without feeling too bad about it if I thought, and if you like that, here, go buy these 8 novels or whatever.
Right. Which now that you bring that up, that's exactly what I do. I have a free short story on my site, and it's exclusive to the site. Yeah, and you do too. So so we both use, and it's not first in series though. I think that's the difference. His question.
Well, yes, right.
So, the whole perma free thing. The new ebooks can have video. Do you feel this helps for short story ebooks?
This is news to me. Ebooks can have video. How does that work?
I think that's an EPUB 3 thing, and I've not played around with it, but
are people selling those at Amazon?
Don't know. Yeah, Amazon would be about the only place I can think of where those would sell right now. I'm sure my folks in the comments can probably speak to that. That's not one I use.
Sorry, Rusty. That's news to me.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
I mean, I can see people, on the about the author page or the acknowledge or afterward, whatever you call it, which is usually kind of boring. A short video of you saying, "Hey, thanks for reading my book. I really appreciate it." I can see that being cool. What other kind of videos would you like? A trailer or I mean, if people have already got the book, they don't need a sales trailer. So
I could see maybe having like some behind the scenes stuff. Maybe like I put every one of my books has what I call my note at the end, so I could see
yes,
maybe doing that as a video and
yeah,
in
yeah, I could
addition
see
to it.
that.
Let's see. Lexi says, I think
Hey,
multimedia
Lexi.
EPUBs like that have limited access on most
Right.
platforms. It's something many devices have not been built to accommodate. So I think that's accurate.
So probably
Um,
someday, but maybe not now.
yeah. But you know what? Anything can happen. It's a crazy world out there.
Well,
And the
particularly
industry keeps shifting.
if it's just at Amazon, I mean, as it is, you sometimes have to tweak the file a little bit, like
Right.
between Amazon and Draft to Digital, because of
Yeah.
course, some of the retailers don't want to distribute anything that has a link to
That hasn't
Amazon, and I
mentioned
don't
Amazon.
blame
Right.
them.
Right.
So,
That would
you
be a
can do
good
that.
use of tools like our universal book links at Draft to Digital. So, Bill,
You
we
know when I
are.
use those most, Kevin, just so you
When do you
know,
use them?
it's when I'm doing some kind of advertising and somebody wants to know all 8 links where this book can be
Yep,
bought. I thought, universal book link
that's what they're for.
saves me a
That's what
lot
they're
of
for.
time.
That's what they're for. Now, so we're at the end. We're gonna have to wrap up. But people, I have WilliamBernhardt.com as where people can find you.
Right?
Is that gonna do it? Is there anywhere else people should look?
That's great for me. And if you want to know more about the conference, the WriterCon conference, or the small group programs, or there's a cruise, we're doing a WriterCon cruise in April. That website is writercon.com. I will warn you that there's nothing there yet about 2023 because we just finished 2022, but give you another month or so and the website will be ready for registrations for WriterCon 2023. And there's information about the cruise there now.
All right. I'll check that out. I'm not getting on the cruise. Everything in the ocean is trying to kill me.
No, we're going to have fun. We did this once before in 2020, just before things
Oh
got
man.
bad for the lockdown. I mean, we were fortunate. And of course,
Yeah.
and it was a big hit, but we couldn't do it for 2 years for obvious reasons. So now
Yeah.
we're going to go back on the ocean. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be a blast.
Back
We've
to
had
the ocean.
had a good registrations for it. So I think it's going to be a good time.
Well, good luck. Enjoy that. And if anyone's interested in that, make sure you go to writercon.com. Make sure you check out williambernhardt.com for everything Bill Bernhardt. Bill, so as always, it was a pleasure to chat with you. I'm glad you were on the show. Thank you for
No, it's
being here.
great. Thanks for having me.
Everybody else, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Self-Publishing Insiders. If you're listening to this, make sure that, and if you're watching this, make sure you go to ddlive.com and bookmark that page so you know when new episodes are coming up. We've got one every week. We're booked out all the way to the end of the year on this thing. So make sure you're tuning in live. And of course, every Thursday we drop a new episode of the podcast, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Once again, Bill, thank you. And everyone else, take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks. See you later.